Hello out there. Welcome to the No Shit Cast. I'm your host, Matt Frazier. Tonight's show, my co-host will be Eric Smith, the mad historian, and the Occidental Taoist himself, Mr. Jeff Cody. How you doing tonight, Jeff?
I'm doing great. How about you guys?
We're doing fantastic here. It should be noted that we've done a podcast with Jeff before, and it's actually one of our most viewed podcasts. So, being the attention whore that I am, I decided we should probably have him back on.
Yay.
You know, because that seemed to work out pretty well. So anyway, I guess a little housekeeping here. We've been growing significantly, and still working with the X Factory. Jeff, you ever been over there to that website? The X Factory? Have you seen it yet?
I actually just this past week saw the connection between the two of you as you guys started to publicize it a little bit more. But I've had a crazy week, but it's on my to-do list. I need to go over there and just check him out and see what he's doing. The sense I've got is that the man's kind of a web weaver. You know, he connects people and things together.
Oh, yes.
Am I accurate there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and he's got,
a web weaver and a coder.
Yeah, big code monkey.
Yeah.
Nice.
And if you get the chance, man, I'm going to make a recommendation, okay? I found these guys from this site about 2 years ago, and I'm going to murder this name, but you got to check this out, okay? They're called, I think it's Busilis or Busilis or Busiles. It's Busilis. And they put together like these interesting, it's like audio and video that's put together to it's sort of like it's an experience. It's not, I guess you could classify it as music, but it's more than that. And it's just real interesting the way that they put stuff together. And that's one of the things I love about the stuff that Tangent gets, or the X Factory gets, because I don't know how he does it, but he comes up with these really interesting artists, and this is one of them that I highly recommend you check out. So,
cool.
So tonight we wanted to talk to, and Jeff actually brought us this topic. We wanted to talk about comparative metaphysics. So why don't you kind of frame this up for us here, bud? And you know what do you mean by this? What's your interpretation of comparative metaphysics?
Competitive metaphysics would be awesome.
That would be. I was thinking the exact same thing. Competitive metaphysics would be right on that.
It's kind of what's happening
You have to get people
in the
who
Middle
are really
East.
skillful at it, though, to make it interesting.
Yeah.
I can outpray you.
They have people that do rock, paper, scissors on TV. Like they have world championships, so why not competitive metaphysics?
I'm down with it. I'm absolutely down with it. But I'm sorry, Jeff. Go ahead.
No, it's all right. It's all right. So, there's kind of two definitions you can go with it. There's been a couple of academic texts that have been written about comparative metaphysics, but their approach is not so much to like contrast and compare one to the other. It's really about arriving at a deeper understanding through comparing them to come up with a sort of a total metaphysics that incorporates the truths that they can find that are not contradictory. At least that's my understanding of it. I read a little bit about that, but what I really wanted to do was just kind of talk about the different systems, different systems of metaphysics that are out there, and just kind of compare them and see the corollaries. I've been very active in the metaphysical community in a larger sense, at least in the New England area, for a number of years. And one of the things that I have found is that everybody's kind of got their little niche of stuff that they really kind of glom onto, and it's their kind of expression. And some people learn cross learn a lot of different things, but there really hasn't been a concentrated effort of like really taking these systems apart and examining them in relationship to each other and finding really powerful common ground to work with, and try to get kind of like they talk about in this academic one, something more potent that is a truth behind it all. Now there's a few authors out there that I think do a really great job, but they tend to work in their sort of specialized knowledge base, whether that's the more pagan and Wiccan community, or whether they're in sort of Reiki as an example has kind of created this whole metaphysical community around it, and there's a metaphysic behind it, and Michio Kushi taught, and there's unfortunately one of the things that happened is that with Reiki, I really feel like there was a disservice done at one time where it was fairly easy for some people to get a Reiki mastery certification. They go and take a few weekends and do a week long of training, and bada bing, bada bang, and in 6 months they're a Reiki master, if that. And I can't tell you how many people along the way, as I've been in my own natural healing practice, encountering people that tell me they're Reiki masters. And I'm doing qigong as much as I do, and tai chi. I'm pretty sensitive to energy and to chi, to what the Japanese would call ki, and I really didn't feel like they were like they were really at that place where mastery can really be spoken about intelligently.
Now, did you pronounce that? Is it Reiki?
Reiki.
Reiki. Okay, and
Reiki,
that's the name of the founder who founded that particular branch of that?
That was Michio Kushi.
Okay, I got you. So why is it called Reiki?
Honestly, it's not one of my strong suits. I don't really. Because of that, because of what I kept encountering, I kept encountering a sort of fly-by-nightedness.
Gotcha. Sort of a watered-down version.
So it kind of turned me off from it. And later on, I actually did meet a couple of people that I would consider to be masters and have a high level of mastery. And I know a couple of them now. And I have a lot more respect for it with those people. But again, there's still a lot of people, running around, just declaring that they're Reiki masters and they can heal anybody, and yet they're very unhealthy themselves. And, what I learned in the Taoist system was that if you couldn't figure out how to maintain your own vitality and your own balance of health, then how could you possibly help somebody else? Now, I understand that their metaphysics is different, and I know that there's, they're operating off of this idea that they connect with the universal energy, and they're channeling that through, and they become a hollow bone, as the Native American peoples would call it. But I spent some time studying with a Native medicine person as well, and I kind of saw what it was like for somebody to become a hollow bone. And brother, they ain't. Some of them are. Again, like I said, I've met some true masters, but a lot of the people running around with that title are not really. So there's a sort of a buyer beware mentality you have to have when you approach it. But that's also true of qigong nowadays too. There's a lot of people out there, operating that metaphysical system. And I think actually, before I go too far into any of those specifics, I think we kind of need to define how they're, like what is their worldview? What are we going to compare?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how do we compare these things?
Right.
So, the Reiki, the word Reiki means something very specific. I think it's universal energy. I think Rei is universal or oneness or something, and Ki is the energy.
Oh.
And so it's that oneness energy.
Gotcha. Okay.
There was another dude, Yusui, I think he was the dude who actually spread it around. I may have misquoted the dude's name. I may be confusing him with a shiatsu guy. I told you, Reiki is not my primary thing. It just happened to be something
No, it's okay. I do the same thing when we're talking. Like I'm like going to say something. I'm like, okay, as soon as I say this, I know someone's going to point out what was wrong with it, but it's all informal.
Or ask a specific question, right? Yeah.
And I know I get like people's names wrong all the time.
Sorry, Jeff. Go ahead.
Yep. Sorry.
Oh, you know what it is? I did confuse it. Michio Kushi was the guy who introduced macrobiotics.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's I can't even remember the guy's first name. It was Yusui, Usui. He was the dude who spread around the system of Reiki that's kind of probably the most common right now. But, the Chinese will tell you that there's a village or the region of China that they claim that the Reiki that Yusui was spreading around was actually a Qigong system that was part of their lineage and their region for, a couple hundred years before Yusui came around. And it's very possible. I mean, Yusui, from my understanding, again, it's limited because I really didn't study it intensively or anything. I just kind of learned a little bit peripherally.
So, but your premise here, though, isn't that Reiki isn't beneficial. It's that a lot of people are claiming to be masters of this, and you don't believe that they've spent near the time nor the investment in education to be making that claim, right? You're not saying that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not even about education so much as it is about actual experience and wisdom, and you know, my understanding from what I learned from Jim Wolfe about the native traditions. You know, if you're going to become a hollow bone, a channel for, you know, divine force, you got to do a lot of internal work. You know, you've got to really kind of clean the pathways.
You can't have a hollow bone without a lot of work, right? You got to dig all that stuff out of there.
Right, exactly. And you've got to dig out all your own stuff and kind of clean it out and all that. You know, and of course here I am talking about all this, and I'm revealing some of my own ways in which I probably still need to clean out my hollow bone or my bone. At the same time, I'm not trying to like knock them. I just think that they do themselves and their traditions a disservice when you go around throwing around master. Like I've had a number of people throw around the word master for me, and I'm actually fairly uncomfortable with that. I mean, despite the fact that I have, you know, nearly 30 years of experience and I've extensively studied, you know, I got a lot of personal development to work on still, and I feel like we all do, and I've certainly done my share. At the same time, you know, maybe I've got a lofty ideal of what mastery really is, and there's a part of me that feels like mastery is really just an understanding that that there is no end to the journey. That as they say in Zen, you know, like what happens, what happens during enlightenment, and you know, the Zen monk puts down his yoke of water that he's carrying up the mountain, and then they ask him what happens afterwards, and he picks up the yoke of water and begins walking up the mountain again, you know, and that was his answer to his disciple. And I think that there's a lot of reality to that in mastery, and I think that you might have moments of real clarity and insight and just, you know, amazing perception and perspective, but you still got to chop wood and carry water.
We see this a lot, especially in martial arts, right? There's always back in before the internet days. I think they turned up a lot more, but you would see these guys that would claim to be masters of these forms of martial arts and stuff like that, and some of them would even be legitimate forms of martial arts, and then they would just make up their own, like, you know, kung fu stuff, you know, like dragon death fu and whatever.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of too. That same concept of martial arts and mastery and stuff, but really, like you were saying, you may expect too much from mastery, but I don't think so. I think anytime that mantle's being given, you know, you really can't master something too much. But another way of looking at that is like what you said, the journey never ends.
Well, and it's a difference between it being demanded and being given that respect too. Okay,
sure,
so if someone's saying that of their own fruition, you know, like that's one thing. But if you start up a karate studio and say everybody's going to call me Master Dan, whatever, you know, then that's a whole different thing. You know, what have you done to earn that to that title? Right. That's kind of what you're getting at, isn't it? Like
absolutely. There was you actually remind me of a funny anecdote. When I moved down to Florida to study Chinese medicine at the Dai Institute down there, I decided I didn't want to be an engineer anymore. I didn't want to do any part of that. I wasn't going to look for a job doing that. And I literally took a job teaching very beginning martial arts to kids at a YMCA. And I went to all different YMCAs, and I taught a beginning level class, and it was a lot of fun. And I certainly had the background to teach a very beginning level kids class, you know. And I look back now, and I think the best thing I had going for me is that I was in amazing physical shape, incredibly flexible, and willing to work like the Dickens and do everything with those kids and have a blast. So I just was very successful at having kids come to the classes. And so there was this one place down there we were going, and the class that I was teaching kept growing. It grew so big that I had to create a second class because we couldn't fit everybody in the room. And there was another guy who taught Taekwondo there. And after class, he comes over, between the two classes, he comes over and he introduces himself to me. And he says, he says, I introduced myself. I said, I'm Jeff. And he said, I'm Master Dave.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I said, how you doing, Dave?
I bet you are.
No, it's Master Dave. And I said, well, that remains to be seen.
Right.
And I wasn't trying to like be a jerk or anything like that. But, if you have to claim that, frankly, I don't know necessarily that you deserve the title. Let somebody else give you that if you're going to wear it. And that's kind of where I come from. The Chinese tradition, they've got this sort of like formalities. There's these, if you are a teacher, they call you a shifu. And if you have students that become shifus, they become teachers, then you are a master. That's what that's the actual. There's like it's actually a title that you're given for that level. And I think that's somewhere people have kind of labeled me that is because I've taught a number of people who teach other people. In fact, I've taught some people who have taught other people who have taught other people.
So in a way, a master is somebody who gives back to the society in which these things function.
That's like a mandatory thing for the Gracies, for Gracie, and probably the Machados too. But I think that I'm trying to remember who said it. There's a lot of amateur black belts. It was one of the Gracies that said that, and his point was, you're not really a black belt until you're handing the knowledge down to somebody else. You're not a master until you can take the knowledge that you've learned now and put it in a format that other people can learn from it. If you can't do that, then you're not there yet. You're still. And I thought, man, wow, that just kind of blew my mind, right? About that family is almost like royalty in martial arts at this point, anyway. But and the Machados and the Gracies,
certainly
both.
In the jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, big time.
The Brazilian jiu-jitsu styles and stuff.
And
they've made a great impact with the MMA and their dominance of MMA. And actually, they're changing the landscape of MMA as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. But that's the difference, right? That's not a 6-week certificate course and you're a master now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you could take some lessons in some way, and that would, some workshop or whatever, and that would confer mastery on you. And that's just, wow, I can't even wrap my head around somebody accepting that as for me, it's like if I'm going to achieve a particular level of skill in something, I want the real thing. You know what I mean? I'm going to put the rubber on the road. I'm going to test it out. I'm going to play around with it. I'm going to see if it actually works.
Yeah, right. Right, exactly.
Because how, especially with something like martial arts too. But this actually goes back to metaphysics, and I actually feel it's the same with metaphysics. Now, I use a lot of the metaphysical understanding that I've done to do a lot of healing work. That's kind of my shtick.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit for someone, though, because you're the Occidental Taoist, right? So this isn't, Joe Schmo walking down the street kind of with an opinion here when it comes to Chinese medicine especially, right? I mean, you kind of have a history of knowing what the hell you're talking about.
Well, I like to think so. There's probably people that would disagree with that because there's always people who are like, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Always a fucking critic.
I've certainly done my share of that in the past, too.
What's the Occidental Taoist? I mean, where's that? What's that coming from?
Well, that's, it's really interesting. For me, I kind of, for a number of years, I became kind of a hermit in this. I did my work. I studied Chinese medicine, and I studied Taoism, and I studied the internal arts of Taoism, and I studied internal alchemy and some of the metaphysics. And then I got really interested in other metaphysics too, and I did my own sort of study of comparative mythologies and comparative metaphysics myself. And it was all fascinating to me, and it's like my passion. It's something I would love to just spend all my time doing. I'd love to just sit around and get as many different books and practices going as I can, and basically try things. Yeah, I'm an experimenter. You know what I mean? Like when it comes to metaphysics, I'm like I said, I want to put the rubber on the road. Like, does it work? Here you are, you're making a claim that that this thing can change the nature of reality at a fundamental level, or that you can bring change into being. and in some way. And I was like, well, prove it. Do that. Show me. And so I engaged in that intensely, and I did my thing. I shared with people who were interested, but I was really quiet about it. I didn't do a lot of promotion. I didn't hang up a shingle. There's a couple of times I opened a facility, and it was fun and all that. But I got to be honest with you, at some point they just get to be a headache, and it was just and people. One of the things I found about in the modern era, communities come together and then they kind of explode. They just people go all over the place. Their lives change and they go. And because
Absolutely.
I wasn't doing a lot of heavy promotion as part of it, when I kind of followed the Tao about it. I was like, when there was a group of people who were really interested, and I kind of met them in the park. Usually I was doing Tai Chi, and they would kind of come and ask if they could follow me, and I was like, sure, come on, and I mean follow along with what I was doing. I don't mean follow me like a guru.
Right.
Tell them, leave me the hell alone. I don't need any part of that.
Master Jeff.
It's like the last dude who went in for the whole, that Messiah complex thing. That didn't turn out so well.
No, it didn't work out real good for him, did it?
No, and I don't need that.
No thanks.
He might not have even been the last, but
Well, I would question anybody's sanity that would follow me as a Messiah anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That's also valid and true for me as well. I mean, anybody who would put me on that pedestal is like, are you not watching? Have you not been paying attention? Are you that, you're not in touch with reality here.
So Jeff,
Anyways.
I just have a question. In your experience, what common denominators in metaphysics have you found that are the most prolific throughout the different forms that you've researched?
That is such a great question, Eric. That is such a great question. One of the things I also want to say, one of the things I've learned over the years is that you can tell really great thinkers by the questions they ask.
Thank you.
I'm going to pat you on the back there. One of the things that I found very common is that most really deep metaphysical systems see the web of the universe, the forces of the universe, as an intricate web that is interwoven. And that there are various powers and currents that influence and in some cases control to a degree. Absolute control, I don't know if that's actually a thing, because it is a web. Everything's influencing everything else.
So when you say currents and stuff, do you mean in the sense of metaphysical currents, or do you mean something more physical like ley lines?
Oh, all of the
or
above.
both. Okay.
I mean, they're all just various. They're all various degrees of materiality or immateriality.
Gotcha.
That was part of the thing that I kept seeing was that in most metaphysical traditions there is a perception of an unseen world, that underneath, between, behind all of being there is something not seen.
So you're saying
and those things that are not seen are interpreted differently, but they all have an unseen world. And sometimes that unseen world is just purely energy and currents of energy, and sometimes it depends upon the system. And sometimes those currents they see the currents of energy, but they also interface with those currents of energy as living beings. Like the animistic tradition, the shamanic tradition. So, one of their basic kind of concepts is that everything is a someone.
Okay, I got you.
There's various degrees of consciousness in everything. Like a table has table consciousness. It can only have but a limited amount of variability in its consciousness. But as long as it maintains table consciousness, it maintains the continuity of being a table.
Right, and that's something that Plato, I think, subscribed to too. When you read the Republic, he talks about there being forms that are the essence of whatever the thing is, and that all things possess this. And you see that in a lot of tribalism and stuff too. Would you say that it's fair then to say that this common denominator of connectivity between the real world and the metaphysical world might be one of the catalysts for proto-religions, since these things are connected with the things that you had talked about, like shamanism and that sort of thing?
Well, I think it absolutely is. I mean, I think most of the proto-religions came out of some kind of, ecstatic experience of one kind or another, whether that was created through a power plant or a entheogen, or whether that was created through rites
and rituals
or chanting and mind enchantment and mind hypnosis type of work, or even meditation and other forms of like asceticism and ordeals. There's
don't
in
forget
the Norse tradition.
Don't forget
this idea that
the stoned ape. Don't forget the stoned ape, right? And that whole thing. That yeah.
Are you talking about the bin?
No, I'm talking about there's the stoned ape theory about the like where the concept
gotcha.
that's where people first started to make.
Gotcha. Yeah, like the psychotropic substances.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Right, and that those were,
well, those are like
certainly wrote an awful lot about that.
Well, there's two schools of thought on that whole theory too, right? That one is that, well, if you take these things, you'll talk to God because you're tripping balls, and then the other school of thought on that is
it connects you to
that
medical
it breaks down the
barriers.
the barriers between you and that's that orchestrated OR stuff again, but. And actually lets you connect to the metaphysical world without the filters. So it's really interesting to see how that gets discussed kind of both ways,
And one of the things that's really fascinating to me is the commonality of information. Much like the 100th monkey thing, there's this idea that we with these altered perceptions that we attain through various methods, we're attaining a sort of super intelligence and a supra normal capacity to perceive interwoven patterns that we normally would not see and normally would not perceive.
Kind of like in Jung's theory of synchronicity.
Right. There's some of that. That's Jung certainly is part of it. The collective consciousness, all that is definitely part of that whole idea. But one of the things that was really fascinating to me, one of my mentors tells a story a lot about this anthropologist who went down and studied the ayahuasca.
The plant that has the DMT concentration in it that people go down and get spiritual enlightenment when they take it.
Right. Well, one of the things that he kind of conveys is that this anthropologist, had this experience of the snake, that great anaconda or whatever it is that is sort of like the moderating spirit that they call of the ayahuasca, and or mediating spirit. And in so doing, he saw these patterns on the snake, and so he drew them out. And then he was giving a talk on it back in England or wherever he was from. I don't recall all the details of it. But in the course of giving that talk, a DNA specialist, a DNA scientist, saw it and saw that it was exactly coding. It was actually human coding.
You're talking about the double helix?
Or the letters, the four letters that, what is that, like A, T, and...
Honestly, I got to tell you, I know next to nothing about DNA myself. I couldn't intelligently talk about it if you...
That's probably what he was talking about. I mean, because you said that it was the same coding, right?
Well, it was imagery, though. It was like, the imagery of how... I guess it's how DNA is turned on and off.
Okay, so then more like what Matt was saying, the double helix then. Like the imagery
it was the
of that.
double helix, but it was more than just the double helix. It was actually specific codes turned on and off. And when the DNA scientist examined it, he discovered that it was the DNA codes that we carry from our ancestors.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so what was happening is the ayahuasca was activating and revealing to him that ancestral knowledge. Now, let's go to animal knowledge a little bit. Like a sea turtle, it has spent its entire existence in a shell, in an egg, inside the sand, And it doesn't matter how far from the beach it is, it knows unerringly the direction it needs to go to get to the water.
Right.
And it also knows what threats it needs to worry about and how to counter them as best as it can.
Right. So
that is passed down through the DNA.
Right. Specifically, it's passed down through the mitochondria deoxyribonucleic acid. That what's passed down from the mom, the same way that they do genomes on people. Like if
Right.
there was ancestral memories, it would be done through the mitochondria DNA because
yeah,
it's the
part
thing
of
that's passed down.
It's part of the BIOS. It gets
Right.
Yep.
So, my mentor's expression of that is that, we are the living river of blood of our ancestors, that we literally in our blood carry their knowledge with us. And part of his particular tradition is about learning how to unlock that. It's not all of it, but it's certainly a part of his tradition of metaphysics, and go in and explore what your ancestors knew by connecting with them, aligning to the way that they thought and saw things. Recognizing things like, our ancestors would look up at the moon and they didn't see that as just a body in space. They saw that as a physical representation of a goddess. That was the body of a goddess. And further, they could observe that its changes wrought changes on the face of the earth. Now, of course, we know that these tidal forces and all of that are part of our scientific understanding, but that doesn't necessarily negate the conceptual idea.
Oh, no, there's a lot of calendars that were based on the lunar cycle and rituals.
Absolutely.
And a lot of things were based on the lunar cycle. And so, yeah, it was definitely a deity as well as a timepiece and had
Right.
a lot of significance in the metaphysical world and metaphorically that directly related to the physical world.
Right. And, of course, a lot of the ancient polytheistic religions in Europe evolved out of the interdynamic play between the solar and the lunar forces, because they were the two predominant forces that influenced us. The solar forces created what they call the wheel of the year, which is that cycle of the seasons. It was responsible for the cycle of the seasons. And it was our relationship. A lot of times people take that and, they go into the flat earther kind of mindset, or they think that they're talking about a flat earther kind of mindset, like the sun doesn't revolve around the earth. Yes, we know that. At the same time, it is about relationship. This is one of the other things that's very common in every metaphysical system I've ever encountered, is that relationship is paramount. How you are relating to the powers and forces that surround you determine the outcome of any endeavor you're engaging with. And there are a lot of forces around you. Now, a lot of the studies of astrology and astronomy and dowsing and ley lines, all of those things were studies trying to understand the flow of those subtler forces that people would encounter and sometimes be able to sense or feel. Now, one of the things for me that's I'm just going to kind of talk about the human being here for a moment. We are a bioelectric and biomagnetic system, and all bioelectric and all electrical and magnetic systems interface through their magnetism and their electrical current. And if everything is like that, and there's a lot of suggestion about that. I don't know if you've ever read anything about the electric universe. And there's an acquaintance of mine, Ramon Carriega, who's also extensively studied in the Taoist traditions, as well as a number of others. He really kind of promotes and has written, he's got a whole treatise coming out about the electric universe as opposed to gravity, and how gravity is actually just a part of the magnetic and electrical system of the universe itself. And he's got, he's very
I have read a little bit
it
about
all.
that.
And he's got really great, theories and theorems and all that. And some of it's kind of like, it goes into realms I'm not as interested in. Because, I've been very interested in neurophysiology and how we translate what we pick up. But when you go to this, like, you start considering that we are these biomagnetic and bioelectric beings interfacing with other bioelectric and biomagnetic beings, you begin to understand some of what Rupert Sheldrake was talking about when he talked about how different different species of being communicate through what he calls a morphogenetic field. Like if you see a flock of birds, they literally can't individually process all the micro changes they need to make in order to fly together and not slam into each other and have, especially the small birds that, they have those weird clouds that kind of shape.
Oh, yeah, like aphids and stuff.
They literally can't do it.
Right.
They do not have the processing power in their nervous system. But what happens, and this is what Rupert Sheldrake's assertion is that they together create a magnetic field that shares the processing.
That's being studied now, and quantum tunneling and things like that, Jeff, are starting to be thrown into that now too, where they're studying that you can make muscles move before the thought is even formed in the brain, like and stuff like this. Sorry,
you just hit a hot topic for me.
Yeah, no, go for it. Go.
One of my favorite writers about this sort of thing is Dr. Valerie Hunt. She passed away just a couple of years ago, and she's a sensitive. She was born a sensitive, but kind of suppressed it because she wasn't accepted. People thought you were crazy, right? So she kind of suppressed all of that, and she went the route of science. At first, she became I think it was a kinesiologist or a physical therapist first, and then a kinesiologist, and then she started to study neurophysiology. Eventually, she became the head of the research department at I think it was Berkeley for neurophysiology. And what she was researching was mind, like what is mind, and she has a great book called Infinite Mind. And if anybody really interested in diving into this sort of thing, I highly recommend it. She goes into the science behind it. I had some pretty advanced physics, and there was a certain point I was like, what? Okay, no, I got to put that. I can't even follow her anymore. But she offers that in the book so that physicists and other scientists can look at it and check her work, and she just puts it out there. And in addition, she proposes that the mind is not really the brain. The mind is actually the field that we generate, and it's actually generated by our fascia, much more so than our nervous system powers it. It's almost like the nervous system is the battery, but the fascia is what actually produces all the nuanced relationship. And this certainly fits in very well with Chinese medicine and Taoist philosophy, because we recognize that the whole body is constantly producing this.
And futurism and transhumanism as well.
Right. Yeah.
There's so much that I want to say about what you're saying, but I don't want to say what I'm thinking because I want you to say what you're saying.
Well, that's awful polite of you, Eric. Thank you so much for not interrupting the guest.
That's my input. There's my 2 cents. There's my 2 Canadian cents.
You wait. When I'm up, I'm going to say some stuff.
Hey, these are Canadians.
So
go ahead.
So, when it's all said and done, I think that we arrive at this understanding that, yeah, absolutely, there's things going on. There's currents of power. Have you ever been in a room or walked into a room where people have fought or had an argument, and they're not currently, but boy, you can feel it in the room?
Yeah, so what's that saying? You can cut the tension with a knife and
not
that
since
kind of
September
stuff.
12th.
Yeah, but a lot of people, Jeff, and for a long time, that was all played off as pheromonal response, subtle body language type things, all this kind of stuff. And now with this kind of idea of collective consciousness that may be supported by physics, quantum physics, or at least is it a theory at this point?
What are we talking about?
Orchestrated? Yeah.
OR is a theory at this point. It's been going on for a while, and people have been examining it and talking about it, and it hasn't failed in any disastrous way, so it's pretty strong.
But
still.
There might be some scientific, mathematical connection that sort of says, hey, we may actually all be connected by shit that we're not accounting for.
That's some of the things I wanted to ask Jeff about. First, have you had a chance to listen to the OR podcast?
No, I have not. I've actually I've got it. I've got it bookmarked so I can go back to it. I want to be able to give it my undivided attention because I have a feeling, it sounds like it's pretty technical.
It is, but it's not.
Physics.
It's not unattainable, but yeah, man, it's kind of a A, B, C, D, step-by-step process.
And it's not different from what you're saying in any real way. It's just a different mechanism. And in it, I talk about collective consciousness and DMT, which is the main molecule they call the spirit molecule that's in ayahuasca. I don't know if I'm going to say that right. I'm going to kill it. Ayahuasca. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the word in my head, and there's like an SH or something, and I can't. At any rate, and we talk about the God helmet, but at the crux of a lot of it is the idea that in the neural nodes in your brain, the cells that make up those neural nodes have a cytoskeleton structure, and that cytoskeleton structure vibrates and interacts with the quantum realm, and that it's part of what makes up your constant stream of consciousness. But in relation to what you're talking about, it would also be that way in which you would pick up resonations and put out resonations in the quantum realm. And a lot of the quantum science, especially chronodynamics and electrodynamics and quantum physics, talk about these energy states and how they relate to matter and energy. I mean, in a way, force-carrying particles, bosons like the Higgs boson or the thing that makes up the strong force in atoms, those things are the bridge between energy and matter to a large extent. Like I said, that's why they called the Higgs boson the God particle, because without the Higgs boson, nothing would have intrinsic gravity, and so everything would be a vector particle, meaning that everything in our universe would be energy, right? So this quantum interplay, which is the same interplay that you get when you're talking about chemical reactions occurring, which is a big deal for us as a species because of this biochemical energy. So the biochemical energy combined with the quantum resonations in this cytoskeletal structure, lends perfect science and physical credence to everything that you're saying, in the sense of energy and the exchange of energy and being able to detect it and give it out. And
a way of quantifying or measuring, whatever you want to say it, another way of sort of stating the same things, but just doing it from a different point of view or doing it from a different source, I guess.
And prior to that, the classical view of consciousness is a lot like you were talking about with like the birds and the aphids and the schools of fish, not being able to work in concert in the way that they do, but that they do. And also a property of that when that happens is the property of emergence, which is the idea that some structure is coming out of the whole of these little groups of things that they didn't intend and that that just happens. And that's how they look. That's the classical view of the mind, that the mind is so complicated and the computations are so complicated that the emergent property out of that is consciousness. And the OR is saying something quite different. It's saying that there's a connectiveness that you can verify through things like metaphysics and meditation and the God helmet and DMT and all of these psychotropic substances. And and like you yourself said, the one of the main components that you found as a common denominator was the connectability, the ability that people have to bridge the physical world with the metaphysical world.
Right. Well, here's something, and I'm going to kind of circle it around back to some our ancestral perspectives on this. And I want you to imagine that you've lived in a forest your whole life. You've lived under the canopies of the trees, and Rupert Sheldrake has really done a lot of work with the communication of trees, and of course we now know that they communicate through root systems and fungal relationships.
And with mushrooms.
Superorganisms. I saw something the other day, Jeff. I hate to cut you off. It's like 1,200 acre fungus.
Yeah.
Like this massive superorganism it's all communicating with each other.
Right, and I just watched a documentary on mushrooms. Remember that couple of nights ago? You're like,
its intelligence.
Yeah.
See, you talked about emergence.
I want
you to imagine that all of a sudden your pathways of perception open up, and you encounter the emergent intelligence of the forest itself. What is your response to that? Well, what our ancestors' response was, they venerated that as a god.
Yeah.
You know, because they lived under the canopy of this, and they realized a lot of it had to do, again, it goes to relationship. You know, our understanding of the term we use for the word God is not, you know, it's been influenced a lot. We've got these ideas about deity, and they are influenced heavily by monotheism and the idea of an overbeing, right? Where my understanding of our animistic
Well, it's
origin
ancestral interpretation. It's all it is.
Right.
Let's be honest, man. If we were any of us, if we were born in another country, say the Middle East or someplace in Asia, we would have all been brought up with a completely different set of ancestral interpretation. Just totally different.
Right. Well, and of course, we're born at different times too. You can go in any of those places and move through time, and you see an absolutely different perspective on all of it. You know, and it's influenced by the zeitgeist, really, of the time itself, of the human zeitgeist. But you know, and of course, now if you get into Parmenides and his thoughts, and I don't know if you're familiar with him at all, Eric, but if you're not, I highly recommend you kind of get familiar with Parmenides. He's known as the father of metaphysics and the father of logic.
Yeah.
But what people don't really know about him is that, you know, they talk about the logic that he brought, but he actually was a powerful dreamer. He was an iatromantus, which is was an Apollonian priest who healed through dreams, and that was his thing. And he went and interfaced with the unseen realm through dreaming. And of course, there was a place in wherever he lived that had this, you know, cave where it was much easier to dream powerful dreams and to attain lucidity and direct your dreams towards specific things. And he was the head of an entire order, from what I understand, of the Iatromantus, and was highly, highly regarded. And a lot of that stuff was kind of pushed aside for the logic that he brought. But he was actually given that by a dream being that he encountered, which was, you know, ultimately you could interpret her as Persephone.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know,
we did study that. I took a test on that like a few semesters ago because I'm going to get an associate's in philosophy at the same time that I get the bachelor's in history. So we did talk about that, and keep going.
Well, one of the things that, like, I don't know if you've ever read Peter Kingsley, which he's done a lot of work on Parmenides, and he also wrote another book called Reality, and that one's really fascinating too. I think he's a really fantastic researcher and thinker, and he's really connected to these things, really old, and that dream world, you know, the dreaming capacity of the mind, and how it connects to the unseen, and that's certainly been one of my kind of approaches too. I've done an awful lot of dream work and do a lot of dream work. You know, Taoist dream yoga was one of the things that I studied extensively, and still do. You know?
Yeah, and that's something that Jung and Freud both did a lot of analysis with, and also it puts me in the mind of Edgar Cayce. You know who he is?
Oh yeah, I live down in Virginia Beach, so yeah.
The sleeping prophet. It reminds me of him, and he was very. I don't know what the word would be, maybe prolific in the sense that a lot of people came around to see him. And
he's written thousands of cures and stuff for people that came to him, and he would go to sleep and then channel while he was sleeping. He would never remember any of them.
Nope.
People would have to be in the room with him writing down what he was saying, but he never remembered a darn thing he encountered.
Also lesser known is that he was the first person to draw the connection between the ancient Egyptians and the Cydonia region of Mars.
Interesting.
And he also predicted the finding the Bimini Road off the coast of Florida. It's supposed to be one of the possible sites of Atlantis. It's off the southern coast of Florida, and it's called the Bimini Road. And,
no kidding.
Yeah, you can look it up and check it out.
Now I'm going to have to research that. I'm going to look it up. It's going to be fascinating.
Right, and
Atlantean lore and myth. You know, there's a lot to wade through there, and there's, you know, people throughout history have, you know, declared that they found Atlantis. So it's always difficult to prove that.
Right.
But I'm always interested in hearing what people have to say about it.
And he also, even more obscurely, Edgar Cayce created a card game called Pit. that he sold to, I believe it was Parker Brothers, that we played over here on Thanksgiving.
Oh, that's the where you
Yeah.
get like
Pit.
yeah, it's a real
stock
simple
exchange,
game though. It's like a stock exchange
Yeah.
game. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really, it was a blast, man. We just like broke it out at the Fraser family Thanksgiving, and everybody loved. I never even heard of it before, but anyway.
I'm not necessarily an Edgar Casey fan, but I do know a lot of weird stuff about the guy.
You know, it's funny, Jeff, because we one of the things that Eric and I have been talking about a lot recently was like I think we talk about how the similarities between like the Ten Commandments and the Book of the Dead from Egypt. You know, so it's kind of what. There's a lot of these kind of things in most major religions.
It's another podcast too.
But when you move past that and you start to get, and I think what you're kind of getting at here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you move past even that and start looking at the philosophy and or the way they describe their deities and things like that, or practice there's even more commonality than that. Like
sure.
in the philosophy itself it's even more. I heard this one time from a Mason buddy of mine. He was telling me about this. It's I don't know. Is it a religion? I guess it's a religion called Rosicrucianism. Are you familiar?
Yeah, very familiar. Actually, it's sort of like another path, not too dissimilar from the Masonic tradition.
Yeah,
I don't know an awful lot about either of them. I was actually, I was the Rosicrucian order at one point because I was doing a lot of research and writing some things. It kind of like contacted me and asked me to become a Rosicrucian and all that. And I kind of read a little bit about where they were coming from, and it was just, it wasn't my thing.
One of the things. So I started reading up because I thought it was fascinating, right? So like I always do, I start reading. Get me a Google and a laptop, and I'm good. So I started reading up on this, right? And one of the things that they I thought was really interesting about their sort of view, if I remember right, was that they sort of believed that there was truth in all the religions, the major religions, and then some, and that that all of these different sects, if you will, were just people all interpreting the same thing, but just looking at it from a different angle. So they were describing it only literally from their viewpoint, which didn't mean that they were wrong, but they were actually probably right from their viewpoint. But it was only one dimension of the thing, and that you have to kind of look at all of them, and they sort of take the commonality, and that was sort of how they formed their basis kind of idea.
Well, yeah. I mean, you get this idea that you've got a bunch of blind people in a room, and they all walk up and they touch an elephant. They're going to touch them in different places, and each one's going to describe what they experience differently.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And I think that there's certainly to that. I think there's a danger to homogeny, though, that we have to be careful.
Yeah,
of.
I was going to say. So what you end up with is a blended whiskey, a religion, is kind of what you ended up with there too. Also, which sometimes is a good thing, I suppose.
My experience of metaphysics is it's a fusion of two different parts of consciousness to attain a functional metaphysics. I've worked a lot with Toltec teachings and the Taoist teachings, and they kind of have a very similar worldview on it. And there's some stuff in the ancient European traditions, also the Norse, that talk about different aspects of soul and mind, and they've got different words for it. But ultimately, one of the things they come down to is that there's the part of our consciousness that's involved in reasoning and making order out of seeming chaos, and it lets us work with things and make tools, and it's a really useful part of our consciousness. And we've certainly exalted that in the modern era. That's kind of like our pinnacle. But the other side is what Peter Kingsley talks about and what Parmenides was talking about, and that's the dreaming or the creative function. And it isn't until those two bridge and are both fully functioning that we have that opportunity to interface with the unseen world in a rational, meaningful way that we can actually do something with it. And I think that for me, when I began to look at different metaphysics, that was sort of, you asked about a common thread. That was absolutely one of the common threads. And from that, I realized that I had to. I'm going to go back a little bit to what I was talking about, the withdrawing and becoming a hermit. The Taoists teach that they say that you should try to step very lightly on the earth, like leave no footprints, almost like environmentalists, take nothing but photos, leave nothing but footprints, that type of thing.
Right on.
It's the same idea. Taoism has that sort of approach, and yet here they are. Here the Taoists have made huge impacts on Chinese culture. I mean, massive impacts that have really shaped where they are today.
Yeah.
So, of course, Confucianism and Buddhism both have as well, the three great roads. But at the same time, I adopted all of that, and I went through just kind of like withdrawing from trying to infuse myself in the world and make a big footprint. And so I'm going to finally get around to answering the question you asked earlier, and that is, recently I began to examine that mind space and the other teachings in Taoism that teach about authentic nature and finding your yuan shan, your original soul or original spirit, and getting connected with that. And as I began to examine, like, what drives Jeff, not the egoic Jeff, but what the passions behind things that enable me to access dreaming and then gives me the fire and energy I need to be able to take my reasoning mind and apply it to a problem. I realized that without that, I was not really living, and that seemed to be against the basic tenet of Taoism, which is like, live fully.
The unexamined life is not worth living.
Right, right. So that's where the Occidental Taoist came in. Is like, one of the things that I find really common to all the Western traditions is that passion. There is that passionate engagement with life, and I really embraced that, and I wanted to re-embrace that. I embraced it when I was young. I mean, anybody who knew me when I was young, Matt, you'd know I was pretty fiery and wasn't always expressed well. But over the years, I've learned how to hone that and harness it and put it to good purpose and let it let it inspire and motivate and then thereby really truly make use of the metaphysics of everything I've studied. And I thought, we come around in this life and we assume, through our various belief systems that we have multiple shots at it, or if you believe in reincarnation, or you're going to spend an eternity in heaven or an eternity in hell, or you've got an eternity, but we don't actually know any of that. Those are all beliefs, and I'm a realist about things. I really like to acknowledge. Now, I have experiences that make me believe. Mine aren't just built on what I've read. My beliefs are built on my experiences, and my experiences make me think that in fact there is something beyond our physical form, and that we can maintain an integrity of being. I don't know how much. I don't know how easy that is. I've got my suspicions. But one of the things that I came to was that part of living was about experimenting and exploring. I think we are meant to be explorers. I almost feel like the human being is meant to be an explorer of being.
Yeah, I would agree.
What is possible? What can we do? And how do we get there? And and working that fusion of the dreaming of just like, what possibility can you imagine? Okay, now how can you work out how to do that? And then understand how this web of intricate web of life and forces and beings can be interwoven or interacted with in a way that helps you accomplish that. That for me is the essence of metaphysics, and it's the whole reason why I'm fascinated by it and I want to study it, because I want to understand how to do stuff.
Yeah.
And you can get simple with it, like, okay, I can whittle a piece of wood, and I can actually do so fairly well, and they're fairly artistic, and they're nice, and I can do that, and there's a mechanical process. But to be honest with you, anybody who's an artist of any kind will tell you that there's a part that goes beyond the mechanics. I do some watercolor painting that I've been playing around with. I'm actually self-taught. I've never studied a darn thing. Some brush painting, and I'm trying to work with the Chinese, the Chinese aesthetic, where it's kind of misty and
yeah.
And I absolutely have no technical skill whatsoever. I can absolutely tell you, there's no way. I can't. I have no idea how it's done.
That's the art you share on your Facebook page, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. And
until I didn't slow down, I blew past a bunch of those thinking, oh, look, he's sharing pictures of art. Like, not realizing that you had actually done those. Sorry, I'm a terrible friend.
no, you're not. You didn't know. I'm not out there going, hey, look at my art. I mean, I'll sometimes put a little thing like, I tried to capture this today, and, I don't know how I feel about it. And there's a lot of that, What it comes down to is, the people who invented art, so to speak. I mean, I don't know if you can say a person who invented art, but, when people first began to express art, they didn't know what the hell they were doing. They didn't have a method. They just tied one part of their consciousness to another and threw some paint on a wall in a cave. And other people found great value in it. And it altered, so much so that it actually altered their consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's another one of those, like, tying things together. Look at our culture. Our culture is driven by artists more than we ever realize. We tend to think of our culture being driven by science and all that. And it is in a large, it's certainly the technology drives a lot, but it is what the artists do with that technology that really determines how people receive it.
Oh, yeah. Joseph Campbell has always been saying that, you really need to update your mythology to make it relevant to the time that you live in, temporally speaking, and that the people who do that are the artists of the day.
Right, right. They reinterpret for the modern era.
Yeah, so it's very much a solid and renewable and ephemeral connection to the metaphysical world art is. And I want to make this point now because it occurs to me that that's one of the reasons why I really like the X Factory and support that, because everything there is original art, no matter what it is that you're doing. Music or watercolors or podcasts or whatever it is, it's original, and it's a good source for finding out what's current, what's really current in people who aren't being paid to do it, that's doing it because they want to do it.
Because they have a passion for it. Yeah, so it's a whole different thing.
It's a tap to mythology in that sense, because when I've been on there and looked through like the songs and stuff, it's like mythology to me, because when I listen, I know there is something inside of that person's head, but I only have the music to understand what that might be. I have a piece of the puzzle, and it's like that when you look at art, it means maybe more to you at that moment, but I don't know. I just wanted to say that because it occurs to me, that's important to say. And I
totally agree with you.
I really thank Tangent for being there and doing that, because I take advantage of that occasionally and stuff, but I'm really bad at promoting myself or anything. It's terrible.
I got to tell you, you did a great job promoting him. Now I've got to go go down to the X Factory, just take it apart, see everything on there.
Dude, you can get lost
in there. Lost for about a week.
Yeah, you can just get lost in there in some of these, and from all over the world, the artists and stuff that you can go and check out what they're, and it's, I've never been a person to go to like an art museum or anything like that.
Right.
But a lot of this stuff, with the way he's presenting it and the way the artists are putting this stuff together, man, I mean,
it means a lot to them when you mention whatever you do feel about it.
Yeah.
They appreciate it.
Because they're really putting it out. I mean, it's really hard on the sleeve kind of stuff that these folks are doing. And you can tell, man.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you really get that raw honesty from
not
a
even
lot of
as
that
a
stuff.
plug, but just as a relevant to the conversation and the point. I think it's a poignant thing to be discussing, given the situation.
Or given the topic, right? Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? And what's really fascinating to me, Jeff, is like you were talking about those commonalities, is how societal groups, there was a lot of space separating like Asia from the Middle East, from
Sure.
And they all kind, like you were getting at, they all sort of still, if you really back up enough, kind of came to a lot of the same conclusions. They just present it in a completely different way, right?
Well, and they frame it. Their minds work differently because their language works differently. So they organize information in different ways, and so they framed it in different ways. But when you get behind that, you can see that what they're doing, they're all aiming towards the same goal. But what's really fascinating to me in the comparative metaphysics is that how it's not just interpretation; it's also different goals. For example, the Norse, when they they looked at different stuff. For the Norse, they have this thing called Higcraft, which is about the soul. It's the crafting the soul, and that's part of their metaphysics. And they break down the body, or the being, the human being, into the lich or the leek, which is the physical body, and they get the energy or the astral body, which is known as the ham or the hida, and depending upon the translations you're using and the language it's coming from. And then, of course, they've got their personal consciousness or personality, and there's that's the mind. And then they have the aspects of soul, and there's they have this on or breath spirit type of thing, and of course that correlates to the Chinese qi. And so there's the commonality, but then there's that other aspect where if you read the myths of Odin, he had Hugin and Munin and thought and memory, and they really they were very important in their cosmology of the human soul. That your memory and your thought were not necessarily the same thing, and that was the evidence of that is that you could have complete amnesia, couldn't remember a damn thing about your life, but you could still think, and you could still think very well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so they saw that, and so they made that correlation, and then they started to see in the Norse there was very much an emphasis on mind and the aspect of how mind plays into soul and how it plays into body. And you find that in the Taoist tradition, but it's completely different, and it's tied to completely different parts of the body. For example, they have the ethereal soul and the corporeal soul. Now, the corporeal soul is tied to the lung, which is associated with the breath, so it's related to the qi. But that's not what the Norse saw. They didn't. That aspect of the Po is the corporeal mindset. It's that sort of reasoning mind, right? The thinking process, and it's there. But the Chinese see it as an aspect of soul, not an aspect of mind. Right, yeah. And then they've got the corporeal soul or the ethereal soul, which is that's related to the liver and it's anchored by the blood, and they with that we're capable of dreaming and creative function and all that. So that's where you get that division that I was talking about the reasoning mind and the dreaming mind. But they don't see it as a part of mind. They see it as a part of your inherent soul, and the soul of your body is very different from the soul of your spirit, and they can separate, and they do, in fact, when you die. And this gets into really fascinating some of the Southern European traditions, where they one of my teachers, Raven Gramasi, talks about how the bone memory of the earth, like when we die, we go back into the earth. That corporeal, the Chinese would express that as the corporeal soul, kind of resolves back into the earth, and we're held in the memory of the earth itself. Like the earth itself has a collective memory of all the people and beings that have lived on it. And so there's a collective consciousness there. But then there's the other part, that there is a true soul, a soul that comes into the body, that has nothing to do with the body except for the relationship. And of course, they teach each other in the course of a life, and that's sort of where Raven comes from. And I totally, I really feel that he's onto something really powerful there with that. And I think that there's something to be said for perceiving that we have different aspects of our being that are influenced by different parts of us. Like everything else, we are an aggregate of a lot of different forces.
Yeah.
This is where the Asians get into the idea. I'm sorry, they probably don't like that term. I apologize. Chinese particularly get into the idea of the ancestral karma or family karma, and that it runs through a lineage. That there are patterns of experience that are going to run through the lineage until it gets resolved, right? And you can certainly see that. I in my healing practice, I can see that.
Them and the
I
Romanians.
see and hear the stories of people who have had these horrific experiences from their parents, and when they were children, and then as you dive deeper, they recall their parents talking about the horrific experiences they had from their parents and these abuses, and that's it's like it gets inserted into the family energy, that sort of living river of blood, and then until that sort of thing gets resolved, then that family line carries that energy, and that's part of like we make an arrangement when we come in. And so as Raven teaches that, he says, we make an arrangement when we come in as a soul to help the family do that. That's part of our work, and through that we are allowed to manifest and have the energy and power to become. That soul can infuse into that body, and that's part of the body memory, and we can transform it so that the next generations don't have to have that, or new currents can be set into power.
I've seen this, right? I've seen where there's speculation that significantly traumatic events, whether they be physical or emotional or whatever, can get passed down through the DNA.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Why wouldn't they? I mean, if a sea turtle can have passed down through the DNA, how where the enemies are, where the water is, if this powerful event that influences the way we think and feel and interpret our world to try to keep us safe or to try to keep us operating functionally in a crazy world, of course we carry it. And of course some of those things are actually non-functional, as we've discovered, because we can create non-function out of function, out of coping mechanisms, while when you're really young are very useful.
Yeah, but when you get older, they're hugely detrimental.
When you get older, they get in your way.
Yeah, big time.
Right?
Yep.
You grow. Everything changes.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
How much have you had a chance, if any, to study the metaphysics of ancient Egyptians?
I haven't very much, mostly because I just wasn't that interested in the mythologies. For me, the doorway for most of the metaphysics has always been the mythologies. I studied the Greeks because I was interested in them, but as it started to go back into the Egyptian, I was just like, I don't know, it just, the aesthetic of it didn't speak to me, and there's an intellectual component in there that I'm sure I'd be fascinated by. But when I first got into all of this stuff, I was fairly young, and I dove into the things that inspired me.
Right, definitely.
Plus, I also think that there was an element, and I think there is an element of one, my ancestral lineage. Some of my family is from Normandy, and I certainly feel very Norse. I mean, if anybody looks at me, you can see that I'm a fairly large guy. I've got that kind of build.
Gotcha.
And I've got Matt will tell you, when I was younger, even though I've got dark hair, my beard and mustache were red. Now they're white because, I'm old or older.
Me too.
I don't feel old. But,
welcome to the party.
Yeah, but, my goatee went all white and all that. But it used to be red. And so I've got that Norseman, the Norman quality in there. And I felt that strongly. At the same time, another part of my family is from southern Gaul, and connected more to the Romans and the Greeks, and so there's that, and that was very fascinating to me. So I was drawn to that, and then my love of the martial arts just connected me to the Taoism. And when I was 12, or actually I think I was younger when Star Wars first came out, but I wanted to be a Jedi Knight.
Oh yeah.
And I read that George Lucas based a lot of his ideas about the Force and all that on Taoist teachings. So I started reading it, and I was like, okay. And then I would see movies about the Taoists, and I was like, these dudes are Jedi Knights. Of course, I was a kid. I didn't understand that these weren't.
In the last 4 days. In the last 4 days, people have came up to me and told me that I look like Luke Skywalker.
From the latest movie, not
the old Luke Skywalker, right?
The
haggard, old.
For Hoth.
Yeah.
He's got a walker. It's a droid.
I wanted to point out to you about this Egyptian mythology. Metaphysics rather. I don't know a lot about metaphysics as they pertain in detail like you do to the human condition, right? But pre-force, because of my hobby, I ended up learning a lot about the Egyptian side of that. So I wasn't researching it because I had an interest in it. I was researching it because it was peripheral to what
you were learning.
Yeah, to this hobby that I was doing. So
right, the history and the sort of philosophy and everything that came around with it.
Well, yeah, to some extent, yeah. And one of the things that I found out that I thought was interesting that I thought you might like is that the concept, the very first idea of the concept of magic, like the ability to affect something on the outside world with the energy from the inside of you, apparently came from the Egyptians with their word hika, which was their word for magic, and Hyaku was their word for magic words. And the way they got the word hika was, I believe they had 12 different divisions within their body, like you were talking about with the Vikings and the Chinese. And one of those was the Ka, and that was the energy inside of their body. And when they would manipulate it to affect change on the outside world, that was called Hika. And so that was their word for magic. And also, ironically enough, or maybe not so ironically, that was the name of their deity, one of their deities, which was a deity of medicine.
That's one of the things that I found very, very common almost everywhere, is that those who were the most metaphysically potent in any tradition, the spirits or beings that they encountered, were almost invariably also healers.
Yeah.
Now, they weren't necessarily exclusively healers, but they definitely were healers. And if they weren't healers, they were tricksters.
Yeah, gotcha. Like in the more like Norse mythology and things like that, right?
Right. Well,
Finnish,
Odin
North,
is certainly one of the great tricksters of all mythology. I mean, he accomplishes most of what he does through trickery.
And there's a lot of that in Finnish mythology as well.
Oh yeah, Väinämöinen and his stories. But in the Finnish, there's that element of music too, and of course the Celts had the bards and
I was going to ask you. Yeah,
music.
they had skalds and bards and all of that, right? And
the Norse had the skalds and the Celts had the bards, and they were, people will argue, could make a very, very powerful argument that the Norse are a Celtic tribe. They're just another, not just, but they're a very specific Celtic tribe with their own sort of.
Well, like the Spartans are to the Athenians, right?
To the Greek. Yeah.
I get it. Yeah, I can see the argument. But what I really wanted to ask you was, what have you thought about, or what do you know about the idea of bridging the metaphysical gap between here and the metaphysical world with music?
Oh, well, I've absolutely done that. That's certainly been a path of my own study.
Tell me about that.
It started with, for me, it started with playing the flute, and it was because I had an interest in the Celtic traditions, and I began to learn their musical stylings. And one of the things that is really fascinating about that is that there are various personages throughout the Irish, particularly heritage and tradition, that they would disappear. They would literally disappear. They would go out into the wilderness, and nobody knew what happened to them, and they'd be gone for a wicked long time. Sometimes, years, 7, 8 years, things like that. Nobody'd seen them. And they would come back and say that they've been taught by...
kind of disappear? Brigadoon?
What's that?
Like Brigadoon?
Yeah, they would literally go into another world, and that's what they came back, and they would say, I was in Fairy, and I was taught to play this music, and all of a sudden, there's this particular style of Irish music that is like Irish knotwork. It repeats, but it never repeats.
Right.
It weaves, and it is wicked hard to play. And my experience of it is mind-altering to play. I've certainly had that experience with jazz as well. When I played jazz flute, I've been transported into other perceptions. I've also played around with sound in other ways. I've got a bamboo flute that I play with, and I've had a lot of fun with that. Instead of complexity like the Irish tradition, I kind of went that sort of Zen-like simplicity, where I actually would pay attention very, very closely to how the wind of my breath would move across the flute and in it. And through that, that, I found I was connecting to something. And I've actually got a picture on my personal Facebook page somewhere. If you scroll through my old profile photos, and at some point I'll pop it up and show it to you guys, where I was playing a song that I had created called "Summoning the Storm." And I called it that because that's what I was attempting to do. And I did not actually know what was going on. But the picture behind me, on one side of me, in front of me, the sky is mostly clear. And behind me is a massive wall of storm clouds coming up right behind me. And I was lost. When I was doing it, I played for a good 20, 25 minutes. I had no idea how long I was playing. I was just playing this energy and putting a call out. And that was one of the really highlight moments of my life. Of course, that was done actually in Connemara Island. And I feel like maybe there was something going on with being connected to something really old and being in a place that is very metaphysical. And I mean, if you ever walk through Connemara, it is, if there's a landscape that is otherworldly, Connemara is it. I'm sure there's others throughout the world. You know, in the Black Hills, they call Pahasapa. That's a sacred landscape to the I believe it's to the Lakota people or the Dakota.
Yeah, the Black Hills.
But a number of them.
The Black Hills.
Yeah, the Black Hills.
To the Lakota.
They call it. They call it Pahasapa, and that is very much a sacred space. And I've never been, but it's interesting.
I got a buddy that goes up there every couple of years and talks about it. That's the only reason I knew that.
Oh, cool. So one of the things that was interesting to me about it is there's a sort of barrenness to the Black Hills, to the Pahasapa, and that is also true of Connemara. And in ancient China, there was this sort of rolling hilly desert, and it wasn't really a desert in the sense of like sands and all that. It was a desert more like of rock and scraggy kind of landscape, and very dry, obviously, and very barren. And that was also a place where a lot of interfacing happened between the seen and the unseen world, and there's a lot of stories and mythologies around that. And so in fact, they if you've ever seen Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, they show some of it.
I have not seen that.
It's a really good movie. Yeah.
If you have not seen that, you absolutely need to see it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Beautiful. I'm behind on seeing things.
It's just beautiful. It's filmed so artistically.
I haven't seen the Titanic yet.
Well, let me. Spoiler:
does it sink?
The boat sinks in the end. Yeah.
Were people in love when that happened?
Yeah.
Gosh. Yes, that's true. I wanted to touch more on the music thing.
Yeah, definitely.
I write music, and I have like a studio, and I design sound and produce it and master it and write music and stuff. And some of the things that I had found interesting about this music bridging the metaphysical gap is some of the things like the rhythm of music being at between 72 beats per minute and 75 beats per minute, because that's like a biorhythm, the heartbeat.
Right.
And have you heard about universal tuning?
Yes, yeah. I've done a fair amount of study on like isochronic tones and binaural beats and how that affects brainwave function.
Yeah,
and all that too. So I was fascinated by a lot of that for a very long period of time, and I use it actually. There was a period of time in my classes where I actually sculpted the music from beginning to end of class, where I created an isochronic tone set of music that I bought a program called Neuroprogrammer that enables you to insert in the background various beat rhythms that induce mind states. And so I would
like theta states in the brain, right?
So I'd take them from a beta state and I'd dip them down into alpha, and then I'd move back up to the high alpha and then down to low alpha, and then cross into theta and come back up into low alpha again and hover, and I would have moments of dipping into theta so they would get that creative function. And my goal was to get them to be able to, like all of my students, to be able to switch back and forth between those two states. Because, again, my work has come along this idea of the reasoning mind and the dreaming mind and this duality. I mean, the Chinese have that duality, the yin and yang and all that.
And right? I've done that in a lot of the songs that I've written, and as well as oh shoot, I lost it. There's another thing I was going to.
One of the things I was going to say.
No,
it's not. No, it's not you. No, it's not. No, I'm just thinking of the different things. There's another property.
Jeff,
to
I got
that.
a question. I mean, anybody that's a musician knows that, if you read the notes and you play them, okay? But anybody that's an improvisational musician, someone that just plays and creates it, to pull that off, you can't be thinking about the notes. You sort of, your brain...
You got to feel.
It's a feel, right. I taught myself...
Yeah, you got to feel your way through it.
When I'm playing guitar, when I'm playing improv, like if I'm playing a blues track or something like that, I'm hearing the notes, and my hands are just doing it. I've practiced past that point now where I don't think about... If I stop and start thinking about playing the notes... you
mess up.
Not only that, but you can tell immediately.
You lose it. You lose that.
That's right.
That flow. The ancient Celts had a name for that. They call it the Oren Mor, the Song of Creation, and their whole take on it was that really, like true bards, the true bards that could do that, they were actually connecting to the Oren Mor and creating out of that, and they could create, they could create magic of all different kinds. And there's actually a guy in Canada who wrote a book on bardic lore, and I'll try to find the name of it. I'll send it to you another time, or after this, because I can't think of it off the top of my head. But it was actually exceptional. I went through the whole thing and I played with it, and he talked about different methodologies and stuff. And he talked about like how in the ancient poetic verses, the ancient Welsh had a very, very sophisticated poetic kind of poetic set of rules, but we can't apply those in English. There's literally no way to apply them. There are elements of their language that we simply do not have, and so during that time, he recommends in his book that you try to find and create your own boundaries. And what the whole reason for the rules around poetry, is to create a boundary that you can then explore in. And I go back to this with bring it back to the music, as I really feel like that's what happens. I mean, when you're playing a blues jam, you're playing within a boundary. You're working in a particular key structure and a rhythmic pattern.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you break it and reform it, right? And because you got to do the unexpected,
right?
You get the whole playing around with tension in blues and tension and release, which is a whole other dynamic. Everything in it is really an expression of energy.
You never play a straight note when you're playing blues guitar. There is no such thing as a straight note, okay? It just doesn't exist. Everything's bent, vibratoed, something,
There's an artist that I listen to called BT, and he took a EKG sensor device, the kind that you put on your head, and he set the parameters so that when he put it on his head and it read from his brain waves, the parameters that it changed in his music while he was playing his music was MIDI parameters. Things like the envelope of a sound, like how fast it decays, or how long it decays, or the attack, if it's a quick attack or long attack or whatever. And these parameters would move based on how his brain waves were functioning. So as they transitioned between states, being creative, the EKG device would read this and send these signals as MIDI parameters to the music, which would in turn change the music and give him different thoughts about the creativity of what he was hearing, which would in turn
change the music.
Yeah,
exactly. It changes brainwaves, which would then again change the music.
Man,
so did
that
it
dude's
fine?
gonna end up in another world eventually.
Right?
Yeah, I know, right? You just opened up a portal to another dimension.
I've opened doors in my soul that have never closed.
And to think we built the Large Hadron Collider, and it was so large, we didn't need that. A lot of people.
All you need is a good musician.
Right. A lot of people don't know how many kinds of dream states there are. There's regular dreaming. There's prophetic dreaming. There's reoccurring dreams. There are lucid dreamings. I mean, that's 4 different kinds of dream states right there. Right. That people.
Right. Well, there's also dreaming into material reality.
Right. Well, there's more.
Anybody who's ever had an out-of-body experience or anything, that you're sending your dreaming body, your dreaming consciousness, which has a form, into physical reality rather than dream reality. So the question starts to become, what is dreaming reality?
Yeah,
And
especially when you talk about
there's
lucid
different
dreaming,
kinds,
which is the
are
inverse
there
of that.
different states? And can we get to the? If you read Toltec material, and I'm not talking about Carlos Castaneda. Carlos Castaneda was really great. He was a great trickster, probably one of the great tricksters of the modern era. And he flat out told everybody he was a liar. And in his writing, he flat out told everybody he was tricking them about it. But that doesn't mean that he was not actually connecting to something really powerful and otherworldly. It means that it did not appear in the way that he necessarily told you it was doing. And instead, he was trying to connect you to something without you knowing. And he says it very, very plainly. In one of his first books, he talks about how the I don't know what the term he uses. I can't recall the term he uses. It's not like a spirit guide, but like the animal spirit that he connects to is a coyote. And his teacher flat out says, "Oh yeah, no, you can't trust them." And actually is like, and I'm wary of you now because you're connected to this thing. We can't trust you. You lie. And it's like he flat out said that. And so was it really any surprise when it came out that some of the things he said were not what he said? Were not, there were evidence of like him robbing ideas from other teachers. But here's the thing: what deep mystic and philosopher in history has not robbed ideas from other people?
Especially when you had pointed out the common denominator between the connection between the physical and the metaphysical realm. They're all working with that same connection.
Yeah, it's all the same. Yeah, it's all the same thing. They're just they're finding one way to
no one's going to
it.
invent the wheel again.
Yeah. Yep.
Because again, it's artistry. He's bringing something into being. The reality of art has nothing to do with the reality of science. They are not the same, and you cannot try to equate them. That doesn't mean they can't influence and affect each other. There's certainly a science to painting and to art, and there is an art to science, I believe.
Well, there's a science to making it physical, Jeff.
Yeah.
Right? There's a science to making it physical, but there still has to be the person creating it.
What is
without the art, you're not going to get there.
Yeah.
At least that's my experience.
Yeah, you just end up with a bag of tools. It takes the artist to take those tools to turn it into something.
So I have two questions. First of all, what is your opinion on reoccurring dreaming? And to be specific, I'm saying somebody who has the same dream, exactly the same dream every night for years and years. Like, what is your interpretation of that phenomenon?
So the first thing I want to say about dreaming and my take on dreaming is no other person can tell a person about their dreams.
I absolutely agree.
They can offer perspective from, like, I would say something like, if I have an interaction with somebody and they're talking about their dreaming, I might respond with them like, well, if this were my dream, this is what I would think.
Right, and that's why I was asking you what you thought about the phenomenon as opposed to describing a dream and asking you to interpret. Because it's people have had this happen to them, and of course, like you pointed out, you really can't interpret it. They are their own best interpreters, right? A psychoanalyst would be good, but that barring that, you're going to need to figure this out yourself. But the idea of it, where does it come from?
Yeah.
Why does it happen?
I think that there's a lot of possibilities, and that's part of the problem with dreaming. Is I think if somebody's going to engage with their dreams and wants to really understand them, the first thing they need to do is they need to understand the language of dreams and their language of dreaming. We each interface with what I call the aneros, which is the dreaming consciousness, the dreaming state itself, from, and it's named after the ancient Greek spirits of dreaming, the aneroi and all that. So I just call it that because I like the name and it sounds wicked cool. In my training, I've trained people to actually learn to do this, and I teach people how to create their own sort of sacred dreaming space. It's called, it's like a personal boundary space, like a temenos, which is this is like mine. And they use that to enter into the greater dreaming consciousness. This is a way of entering into kind of the collective consciousness. But you got to understand, we've got the collective consciousness of humankind, and then we've got the collective consciousness of the web of life.
Right on.
And in that web of life, there are beings that we can relate to because we actually have experience of them. And then there are beings we absolutely cannot relate to because we just don't have any experience of them, and we don't really relate to them in any way. I personally cannot. I am certain if I had dreaming interaction with a consciousness of plankton, I would have no clue. I mean, maybe in my deep ancestry there'd be something coming up, but I would have no idea how to interpret the language that's being communicated to me. Because we're talking about an interface. We're talking about an interface of different beings, and that's from my experience, that's what the dreaming space is. It's like a vast sea, and we can become really, really good at sailing that sea, but we are never the master of the ocean ever. And I don't care how lucid you become, how good you can do at changing your dreams and making them. When you stop focusing on one element of a dream to change another element of the dream, that other dream starts to take on its own form or do its own thing. And sometimes, like for example, in lucid dreams I've had interactions with people that I'm like, oh, you're just a dream construct. You're my dream construct. And they were like, no, you're my dream construct.
Well, I was gonna get into that.
What?
I was gonna ask you about lucid dreaming, but I wanted to hear what your thoughts were on reoccurring dreaming. And
Right.
first,
So
but I was going to ask you if you
you
ever did any lucid dreaming or anything of that nature. And if you had, I wanted to understand what your experiences were with your lucid dreaming.
Okay, so first let me say, and to answer your first question, is I have not really had recurring dreams in my life, so I don't know that I can intelligently talk about them as definitive. I can say that if I were having recurring dreams, I would absolutely endeavor to re-enter a dream. I would literally set about re-entering the dream, and I would begin to interface and interact with every single one of the beings and energies that I encounter in that, and ask it questions and have dialogue, including the landscape itself, because the landscape is a feature and is a being in the dream.
Let me interject something because, now let me ask you real quick, but let me interject. Do you know anyone who has had a reoccurring dream?
Yes.
Okay.
I have.
The reason I'm even asking is because I had a reoccurring dream for like 2.5 years every night, and it's one of the things that scared the shit out of me the most in my life, just because of the absurdity of it. That I knew every time I was going to go to bed, I would have this fucking dream, and it freaked me out, right? And just exactly like you said. That's how I ended up getting a mental hand on it. Was I started interacting as much as I possibly could with my will, every construct, everything, every person, and eventually the dream got shorter and shorter and shorter every night until one night I started to have the dream, and instead of having the dream, I had my first lucid dreaming experience. Everything was there, but it didn't play out, and I was free to do anything I wanted to do, and the only thing I wanted to do was leave. Because I never wanted to have that dream again, and I never did have that dream again. But I could tell you exactly in detail what that dream was. It wouldn't matter to you, like you pointed out, and I don't even know if I understand it to this day. I don't want to ever have it again, though.
As a person who works extensively with people and their dreams, the question that I put to you is, what is so uncomfortable about that dream? And I'm not asking you that to answer me, but I think that it is important for you to understand deeply what is so uncomfortable at the dream that you feel like you do not want to have it. Because what is it that it's going to change?
Oh, I know what the emotional experience. I understand that. I do know why.
Okay.
I do know what the catalyst. I believe I know what the catalyst was that made me have this dream. I don't completely understand the symbolism in the dream, but the emotional context of that symbolism, and like you're pointing out, how I felt about that context.
Right. So one of the things I would say is, in terms of dreaming and symbolism, a lot of times people will use like these symbol dictionaries, or they'll go through symbol dictionaries, or they'll find, what does this symbol mean, or what does that symbol mean? They'll ask, look.
That's always seems so pointless to me.
And I got to tell you, that's, there might be some value in that, but that's not where I come at it from.
But that's like when
I encounter something in my dream, and I feel like it has weight and there's a symbolism there. The first thing I do is I literally make like a diagram, for lack of a better term, and I put the symbol, whatever it is, in the middle of a circle, and then I draw little lines off of it, and every little thought that comes to me about that symbol, about that image, about the being, about the person, about the color, whatever it is, every single thing that comes, I put it, and I try to draw a line of line weight for how strongly I feel like that thought is connected to that symbol. And what happens, or what's happened for me, is when I do that, the mosaic of all of those things
Makes a picture.
And it makes a very clear picture.
That's interesting. That's good.
I'm jealous of you guys.
Why?
I very rarely have like, well, number one, I don't really have dreams that I remember anyway, or even having them. But when I do have them, they're not.
You're not going to convince me that's from a clean conscience, man.
No, I wouldn't say that. You know me too well. We were in the Navy together. But anyway, putting that aside, people tell me about, oh man, I had this great dream and I was flying like a bird, or I was swimming with dogs, or whatever, wacky, crazy stuff. I'm flying. No, I have dreams that literally like where it's me. But it has benefited me in like when I'm really thinking about something like an engineering problem or something like that. I'll have a dream like when I'm trying to figure out how to write code. I'll actually have a dream about writing the code. Well, and in that dream, I'll find the answer for what it was I couldn't figure out. So it sucks. It's like I don't get to do I don't really get to do the fun dreams.
At least you do something with yours. I squander mine. The last lucid dream that I had, I went ahead and put myself in a nearby town called Amanda that has about 300 people, and I put myself in a van full of automatic weapons and populated the city with zombies, with people that I used to know, now zombies, that I was shooting out of the back of the van while the van itself was driving with nobody in it. It was just driving. I mean, I was like the last lucid dreaming experience I honestly had.
Is there some?
I didn't get much enlightenment out of it, but
should we be having a session here, man? Is there some
I don't know. I don't think there's no interpretation of that. I think that's just pure squandering the metaphysical gift that I had at that night, that moment. Instead of looking inward, I was like, zombies and guns.
It's not an uncommon thing for people to play around and to do that. And I actually think that's a healthy part.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear
dreaming.
Good.
I don't know that zombies are necessarily, and shooting them up is necessarily a healthy part.
Okay.
Well, and worst of all,
we might ask questions about suppressed anger.
That's what I'm saying.
Are you mad at the village of Amanda? Possibly.
Well, the fact that it's people that you grew up with there,
maybe, I don't know.
They're the zombies.
Wait a minute. So go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, first, I want to say to Matt, let me ask you this: have you pursued them? Have you pursued interesting and fun dreams, or do you just not bother? You just go to bed and it's like I want to rest and I'm done.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that so I occupy my brain till it shuts itself off with something mundane. Okay, and generally it's reruns of The Family Guy or something like that, right? And then I'll nod off and then I'll shut the TV, and then it wakes me back up and I shut the TV off and that's it. Or I'll listen to something, like I'll listen to music or sometimes I listen to like soundscapes and stuff like the ocean and things like that. But there was one time in particular, some guys had contracted me privately to look into a technology for them because they were afraid that the technology, the way that and I'm not going to name names here or anything, okay, but just trust me on this, that the technology.
Where's the fun in that?
Well, because
I'm just joking, though.
I'm not ready for lawsuits yet. Tangent, get us set up for lawsuits, damn it. But yeah, they had contracted me to kind of review this technology because they felt that the person that was misrepresenting what it was actually capable of. And it was really fascinating. It was a parlor trick. That the guy was using to show efficiencies that I just couldn't calculate as even being possible. Okay, and it was just killing me because I was like, okay, there's no way that this thing's breaking the laws of physics here. There's got to be something to this, and I worked on this. I even built a model of it and to do the testing, but it wasn't until I was for days I was thinking about this problem, and then I went to sleep, and in my dream, I was back in my lab working on it, okay, and I did it like I figured it out in my dream. And then I went, when I got up, I went down and ran the exact same test, and sure as shit, that's where it was. So somehow I had derived this, but it wasn't until I fell asleep that I was able to kind of put it back together. But that's kind of how they break. When I do have dreams that I remember, it's generally because I'm focusing on some problem or something, really hard, and then that's when they pop out.
Here's my take on that. So back in the day, we roamed the various plains and whatnot. If you had been a Lakota person, you'd probably have been roaming around some plains and wondering where the hell the buffalo were. And you'd need it. You'd need to understand. You'd need to know because you need it for survival. Your work was you as a shaman would have to, that was your job, find the buffalo. And so you would work on it, you'd try to figure it out, you'd track, you'd do all sorts of things, because shaman weren't just shaman. There were always a lot of other things. They were medicine people. They were functional in a lot of other ways. They usually had a lot of skills that they brought to bear. And they would do all that. And then they would go and they would incubate a dream for it. And they would do it a little bit more consciously than what you did, but they would absolutely do that. And they would then find where the buffalo were, and then they would go trace it, and they'd be like, oh, yeah, no, here's the track. And and they're, maybe their consciousness picked up on it, and when they didn't consciously pick up on it, there's a lot of speculation about it. I try not to get into, scientifically debunking things that seem to be extraordinary. And the reason is I don't want to create a belief in my mind that it isn't possible. Okay? Now, that isn't to say I believe everything I come across and all the things that happen. I'm fairly skeptical. At the same time, I also approach it with the really open mind that maybe it isn't. I mean, I can't account for it. I can't say I saw that. When we say, well, I must have saw that, I must have, we're not actually speaking from a place of knowledge and science. We're actually debunking something falsely. Because we say, well, I must have done this. That is not good for consciousness, because now you've narrowed the scope of what you can do, what you believe you can do. Now, there's an entire metaphysic, a style of metaphysics called chaos magic, and their whole premise is that what you genuinely believe, balls, bones, down very deep, you can create. And so their whole metaphysic is about how to engineer belief, so that there's no doubt. And when there's no doubt, they produce effects. I will say my own experience of working with it, it's very effective. Now this gets into, you start talking about the secret, what you really believe, blah, blah, blah. There's, they simplified that. They, it became really popular in the masses because everybody thought they could just wishful thinking and they would get what they wanted. Because that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants to be able to, wishful thinking and get what they want.
Now the universe is an ATM machine, right? You can just cash. That's kind of the idea there, isn't it? Is you just wish it into existence,
big
and
ATM
it happens.
Machine. Yeah, you put in your consciousness card and get out the things you want.
Not that, and that's the mess, because there's a lot of stuff because I've read that and seen the specials and stuff, and there's a lot of stuff about that I actually agree with. However, it does, but you could absolutely turn it. It does support that mindset that the everything's here just to serve me.
Right,
and that's where it kind of gets. To me, that's where it sort of loses its soul, because I've met people that have taken it that far, and they don't really address that much.
Look at the human condition. We're very, very ego driven. Very, there's this humans are the pinnacle. Our entire culture teaches us that humans are the pinnacle of consciousness on this planet. That we have a divine right to lord it over the planet and do whatever we want. We don't have a responsibility except as gardeners to the planet in any particular way, but nobody really knows even what that means, and we were thrown from the garden anyway, so...
My ego is offended by that, but my super ego is compensating. The id, however, is doing fine. That's my response.
He just goes,
Eric,
nice.
man, you are very fun to talk to.
Likewise. So are you.
Now, Jeff,
Yeah.
we've got old books that say that we're in charge of everything. Okay?
Yeah.
So
I've got books that say all sorts of crap.
I think we need more books.
I don't. Gosh, I work at a library. I keep coming home with books, man. Jeez.
Must be true. I read it. You know?
No, or worse, I saw it on the internet.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
I read it on an internet, and
So we started recording this late tonight, so everybody knows, just
Man.
because of the way we had to. Jeff's a busy guy, and getting his schedule to work out sometimes can be challenging, but it's absolutely worth it to do these late at night. Except that Eric is about half asleep.
oh yeah, I studied last night for a philosophy final exam that I had today in environmental ethics, and had 2 hours sleep, and then worked at the library, and then took a final exam in astronomy, and I still have to write a paper concerning animal rights, 2 different views in animal rights, and turn that in tonight, and then tomorrow I have my final exam in classical mythology, and then I'm done for a while until next semester.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Merry pagan holiday. So,
Nice.
right? So what were we talking about there, Jeff? You were saying that...
Well, in the dream, we were talking about dreaming to a degree. I was talking about how in classical, you just performed a classical shaman's maneuver, of solving a problem.
I knew I was special.
A problem that was essential to your livelihood, to being successful and doing what you needed to do, to be true to what you promised, to what you felt was right. Those are all great shamanic maneuvers. I firmly feel, Matt, that if you had a motivating force to get you to have other kinds of dreams, you'd have any kind of dream you want to have. I think anybody can do that, but the fact that you're already doing that tells me that you could. You just have to set your mind to it, and you need enough motivating force. But here's the thing. If in those moments where you're watching television and you doze off and fall asleep and you turn the television off, instead of jumping up and going to bed, drift. Don't go fully back to sleep. Drift.
Yeah.
Just see what images come. You're in a hypnagogic state right there. Right? And so you can enter into dreaming like that really easily. One of the practices that I engage in when I'm in a really great space and I've got the energy and the mind, I don't need more rest or anything, because you don't get as much rest from it. Is when I'm going to sleep, I literally watch myself fall asleep. I watch my body fall asleep. I wait till I start hearing myself do that light snoring. My wife will try to convince you I snore really loud, but that's really her. That's it. She's giving me the hairy eyeball right now.
Grr.
So, yeah, she's looking for something to throw at me. Anyways, the first time it happened was really funny. I was laying there, and I was hearing, and I'm like, wow, Susan's snoring really loud. That's what I'm thinking in my mind. And I hear it again, and I'm like, wow. I'm thinking, wow, she's really sawing the wood tonight. I was like, okay, I'm just going to try to let go and go to sleep. And then I realized, I heard it one more time, and I realized I was doing it.
Yep.
And my body was asleep, but my mind was still awake.
Yep.
And that's one of the, there's a guy by the name of Robert Monroe, and he did an awful lot of work with mind states. And he created something called the Monroe Institute, and it's fantastic. He worked with some people that came out of the Casey Riley Institute, the Edgar Casey Institute, and there was a guy who did some Toltec practice and was very, very accomplished. In the few years that he was out teaching, people had all sorts of things to say about the really strange occurrences that would happen when he would be teaching a workshop or teaching people to do various of these Toltec practices. He would literally do what's called the gate of power, and he'd take off, and they'd be like he had to be moving 40 or 50 miles an hour because he just literally moved like a car away from them. And these are practices that the dude engaged in, and it was, fusing his dreaming mind and his waking mind. But anyways, he did a ton of work with the Monroe Institute and really helped them kind of hone in on some very specific frequencies.
Where's that located at?
What's that?
The Monroe Institute. Do you know where that's located at?
It's It's in Virginia.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And in fact, there's a guy who wrote there's a very high-level physicist, very intelligent dude, wrote a book who also worked with the Monroe Institute from way back when Robert Monroe was still alive. And he wrote a book called My Big Toe. The toe is theory of everything. And his assertion is that every person actually has to create their own big toe, their own theory of everything, because it is the paradigm that you're going to use to explore reality. But it has to be true. You can't fool yourself into it. You have to discover yourself into it.
I call that my cosmology, in my own cosmology.
Yeah. And we all do it to one degree or another. Most people do it very unconsciously. What I really feel like metaphysics really is doing that very consciously and testing it out. And that's why I was always about applied metaphysics, because I wanted to test these things out. And when they worked, why did they work?
How much stuff, speaking of that, on that topic, Jeff, so how, and without naming it, because we don't want to insult anybody, but how much stuff have you come across, though, that you're just like, woo, okay, this has left the reservation?
It's really funny. I used to come across a lot of it. I used to be like, wow, you are out of your damn mind. And over the years, I've actually come to a place where I'm like, you know what, I don't know. I've got my thoughts, and I certainly still have thoughts like, geez, where are you going with this? And a large part of it for me is I look at, like, why are you going here? What is your motivation? And that really is valuable to me when I look at that. Like, where are you headed? Is this a genuine exploration, or are you looking for followers? Are you trying to sell something? And that's what you got to look at. You know what I mean? What's the motivation behind what they're sharing, and where they're coming from? I run into a fair amount. The ancient aliens thing, I have no idea. Do I think it's possible? Yeah, I absolutely think it's possible. Do I know it's true? No. And I don't think anybody alive does. And I think anybody who thinks they do is really using bias and confirmation bias as a way of reaffirming what they think.
Yeah, it's no more or less probable than some of the other stuff that we're told actually happened. So that's kind of where I stick it, is in that same category,
exactly.
Right?
There was a book written many years ago. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Atlas Shrugged. And
Ayn Rand. That's a chick. That's a woman.
No,
Ayn Rand.
No, that's not Ayn. That's not. I'm mixing. I'm confusing it.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Not Ayn Rand. No, it's not Ayn Rand. It's not Atlas Shrugged. It's what the hell is it?
You gotta give me another clue.
I'll come up with it. Anyways, he was one of the sort of kind of pioneers working into chaos magic. He kind of predated Peter Carroll, who was a dude who wrote an awful lot about it. And one of the things he talked about is, he says, we've got a thinker in our consciousness, and we've got a prover. And very often, our prover proves what our thinker thinks, and that's its job. It just goes and tries to prove what our thinker thinks. But we have to be really careful, because we can prove almost anything to our thinker, but not necessarily to a true reasoning capacity.
Or objective. Or like
an objective experience. And there's value to objective experience, but there's also a value to subjective experience. And I think that this is the real danger in metaphysics. And I think it's something that it's a challenge people have lived with from the very beginning of working with metaphysics, is that there is the part that believes, and there is the part that sets about to prove what we believe. And there is a very real danger that we can lead ourselves down into some aberrations simply because we get attached to the need to be right.
Yeah,
we get a pet theory, and this happens in science. It happens in
politics too.
Metaphysics.
Oh. That's the fucking definition of politics. Oh my God.
Politics, yeah.
Yeah, it can happen in politics too.
Human endeavor. Every human endeavor has it, because it's a very human trait. So, I think that when we engage in a metaphysical practice, whether we're going to go in a comparative mythology or comparative metaphysics and gather up knowledge from all different sources, or we're going to do it and curate our own pet theories, or we're going to do it from a single source or one or two sources and dive into it, I think we have to be very, very cautious and very real with ourselves. And, this gets back to one of the things I said at the beginning, you got to chop wood and carry water.
Can I speak to the cautious part?
Yeah.
I find this to be funny, and I think you guys might find it to be humorous as well, right? But concerning history, religion, and interpretation of the metaphysics thereof, so you know how you were talking about the cyclic nature of some types of religions, not just in terms of reincarnation, but in cycles like the lunar cycle and things like that, right?
Yep.
So consider when the Mayans, like anyone else of their type of that period of ancient times, with their calendar that was cyclic, right?
Yep.
And their civilization is destroyed. It's gone for a long time. People dig up the calendar, and suddenly they interpret it with their Western post-apocalyptic viewpoint. You know, all the Western religions that are waiting for the end times to come for some sort of war to happen that's in a spiritual sense, right? They look at this calendar and they don't understand that it's cyclic, right? And they get scared because it just ends, and it's absolutely absurd, you know? So you do have to be cautious. You're right. It's not just a word that you're throwing out there. You really do, because not only is that a wrong interpretation, but it wastes time and it's ignorant.
Right. Well,
But no, how do you really feel, Eric? Don't hold it in.
It leads you to a waste of your life resources. You know, one of the things that I adopted from a Taoist perspective that I really liked is that we're born with a finite life resource.
Yes.
You know, this vitality we have. It eventually wears out. You know, the Taoists practice a lot of longevity practices designed specifically to enhance it and extend it and grow it, so that we can use that, like the Ka you were talking about with the Egyptians, we can use it for sorcery and magic or metaphysics and healing and any number of other things. But the real reason it's being cultivated is so that we have a really, really, really long time to study being and to live as vitally and fully as we can throughout all of that. I mean, I want to live until I die. I don't want to slowly fade out and slowly just kind of deteriorate and then become non-mobile, non-functional, non-conscious, and just have that kind of. I want to live, and I want to live until the very moment I die, and I'm going to do my absolute best to do that. That's why I do all the Taoist practices that I do. That's why I share them, too, because I want other people to do that. I think that when we learn those types of things, we actually align ourselves to some natural forces that helps us get in harmony with the world around us. And that's what the Occidental Taoist site is all about, is about sharing that with people. But, my interests go into not just the longevity and the healing, but into the exploration elements, and I certainly talked a lot about dreaming and all that here, and I think that that finding that balance between the reasoning mind and the dreaming mind, and having them play off of each other, and the reasoning mind is constantly checking the dreaming mind, and the dreaming mind is constantly breaking all the boundaries the reasoning mind creates. The mentor of mine that I told you about, Raven Grabasi, he talks about that aspect of consciousness as the guardian mind. It kind of keeps you from experiencing the metaphysical. For example, if you're dreaming and you're driving, you're dreaming you're driving a car and it turns into a bicycle, about an eyelash, you just keep pedaling, right? You're going where you're going anyways, right? You're like, oh, okay, I'm on a bike. But imagine if you were driving down the road and your car turned into a bike, you'd freak out. You'd lose your shit, right? And that's because your guardian mind is trying to protect reality, the solidity of it. And the dreaming mind is always trying to break that solidity. And I think that we are at our best when we balance those two beautifully, and we pass energy back and forth between them, so that we can adapt, we can create change, we can sense the moments of change. In one of my Qigong videos, I talk about this. Like, there's an exercise we do called counter swing, and you're learning to feel in your body the moment of where the physical forces kind of do their ebb and flow. Like, if you throw a ball up in the air, it reaches an apex point and it stops. At that moment, its potential energy is ready to be used in any way possible. It's ripe for change. And part of Taoist teaching is about learning how to sense intuitively with the feeling sense of the body and the mind, the dreaming sense and the reasoning consciousness, observing like a navigator, not the driver. The dreaming consciousness is the driver, but the reasoning consciousness is the navigator.
I have a question.
You should not try to grab the wheel.
I have a question.
Sure.
Because I'm like just a co-host, and I'm not sure exactly what's going on at all times. I know that you've been working on, and it's true. Like I go off to school, and so I don't know. And
I
come
call
back
him up and I'm like, "Hey, we're doing a podcast," and he's like, "Oh, all right, I'll be there."
Yeah, it's like, yeah. I mean, I love it. But I know you were working on videos and stuff, and I mean, I talked with Matt about it a little bit, but I don't know. And then now I'm curious because after talking about all of it and stuff, and what are you making the videos for? And yeah, and you have a business, right? Doing this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I am the Occidental Taoist. I treat people with Tuina and other forms of what they call Zhangyi medicine, which is traditional Chinese medicine. I don't do acupuncture. I gave that up years ago because I don't really need them. I don't need needles. I find I get better results with my hands and my qi and herbs, and then qigong practices, and working with people's minds and helping them alter mind states and all that. They're very traditional in some ways. Anyways, the videos that I make are ostensibly, anybody who knows me will tell you I don't ever do anything for one reason, ever. I usually have layer upon layer upon layer of reason. I'm kind of like I have always taken Odin as a model for how to be very cunning and wise, to learn to be efficient and effective and get things done in an intelligent way that maneuvers energies into place without force, without having to use force. There's a place for force.
Much like Odysseus in the Iliad and the Odyssey. That's how he was represented.
Right, exactly. Very much like Odysseus. So anyways, it's interesting that the corollary of the sounds of the names, too.
Yeah.
I've always found that fascinating, too, name sounds, and how they correlate, and how the names are connected to energies and alignments of things. That's a whole other metaphysical conversation.
Indeed. I'm down with it when it happens. Anyway.
Oh, yeah, no, we'll have that one again in the future, even if it's just us. Anyways, one of the reasons why I'm doing that is I really believe, I look around in the world, and people talk a lot about wanting to create peace. We really want to learn how to get along. Not everybody, because obviously there are, people who are just committed to their ideology, and they really believe that everybody else is wrong, and they have to kill them. And there really isn't a lot of reasoning with that. But the majority of people in the world are not actually like that. They actually want to create peace. And I don't believe we can do that until we learn to establish peace internally. We find a peacefulness with our life. We learn how to not fight what arises for us, but embrace it as an agent of change for our soul, for our minds, and for our personal development of consciousness and intelligence. And instead of using forcefulness as a methodology of creating change, we use the right action at the right time in the right way. Sometimes that action is no action. It's allowing something to unfold and then joining with that unfolding. Sometimes it is waiting for it to unfold in a particular place or time and nudging it when it's there. And it's, for me, it's a path of wisdom, so that I want to teach that. But the beautiful part about it is you can't do anything with your body that you can't do with your mind. You can't learn to feel and follow forces or conceptually have the idea of creating change without resistance unless you can actually do that. And the best training ground is the body, because it's with you all the time. You don't need any things to do with it. And every time you're walking around, you're actually dealing with forces. And so you can learn, it can become a tool for that. And that's what the Taoists did. And then they developed all these practices that they decided as they began to observe, they noticed these things and those things, did certain things for their health. And, their medical system came up out of it. It's thousands of years in evolution. And ultimately, however, it's really about a path of walking with the web of life and saying yes to it. And so what I'm doing is I'm teaching people how to be healthy and how to be relaxed and free-flowing, but I'm also, through that, teaching them how to say yes to the web of life and to develop their perceptions.
So in a class and with a video, right?
In fact, let me finish this. There's a teaching I give, and it's look at what you can't see, listen to what you can't hear, and feel what you can't touch. And people hear that and they're like, "What the hell is he talking about?" And I get that, and I and I'm not going to reveal that here, except to say that when we learn to look at what we feel. We use that part of our minds that creates visualizing. The part of our minds with our eyes, that's connected to our eyes, that creates mental frameworks. And we aim it at what we're feeling. We begin to touch into that. I think that, like, for me, that was the first road. Learning how to feel deeply what's really going on. Like, most people don't feel their bodies. They have no idea. You've got nerves everywhere in your body. And if you think you can't feel your organs, try getting stabbed in them.
Yeah.
You will absolutely feel your organs. So if you can feel them when you get stabbed in them, you can feel them when you don't get stabbed in them. You just have learned to turn it off because it's too much input for you to process when you were a baby. But you are no longer a baby. You know, we learned, here's another thing. We look at all sorts of things, like all the assumptions we make. Everybody stands and walks. Most people learn to stand and walk somewhere between 11 months and 14 months old. And maybe the first couple of months after that, they kind of continue to observe it. But once a person's tooling around pretty well, they never think about it again.
Yeah.
They just do it. Now, how good do you think you were at 11 months at analyzing the best way to go about that, the most efficient and effective for your body? Probably not very good at all.
Yeah, no,
You were good at getting the job done, getting from point A to point B, but is that what's actually best for you? And that's part of what this is all about, is looking at things like, how do I stand? Is that helping me, or is it creating part of the tensions and problems that I have? Where am I creating resistance? And as you begin to go further into this kind of practice, you start like, where is this resistance, this tension that I'm holding in my body? Where's that coming from? I don't need it to stand here. Why is it still there? And that's when we start to access the subtler layers of the mind-body complex, where we realize that our experiences are literally locked down in the energy patterns in the magnetic field and the electrical currents of our body.
And knowing that's so invaluable, man. I've had some in the past, like, terrible tension headaches, you know. And if I would have had the sensitivity and detail and knowledge that you possess, you know, I could have probably conquered that.
Yeah, you could have dismantled those things.
And kind of what I heard this put this way too, Jeff. It's the difference between living on purpose and living by accident. And living on purpose is being conscious of everything you can be, you know.
Right.
And there's only, you know, we can only accept so much stimuli anyway. But kind of what you're getting at is
expand that capacity.
Yeah, you're saying you can learn how to turn on more of your antennas, you can, sort of thing, right? You can learn how to receive more information. You just have to be conscious of it. And that's that distinction. I remember you told Eric once, you know, you were talking about how, you know, make a connection with food before you eat it. Like, think about this thing. How am I going to feel? What's it going to do for me?
What's it going to feel like?
Yeah.
Imagine feeling it. Imagine eating it, what it feels like. Then listen to your body. What does it say?
I was thinking of that earlier today, actually. I was trying to figure out what I was hungry for, and every time I would think of anything that at least was like fast food or anything like that, it was like, oh my God, no.
It's the whole, you know, for me it's
great. I applaud you for that, Eric. That's a huge, I mean, when you start doing that enough, you'll realize your body never wants it.
Oh, it's already made a difference for you, right?
It has. And it's weird, even mentally it has, because now when I watch people going through the lines at McDonald's, all I can think in my head is, man, they're waiting in line for their cardiac arrest and their sugar pop. Yummy sugar pop and cardiac arrest.
You should write ads for them from now on, right? Welcome to McDonald's for your cardiac arrest and your sugar buzz.
There's a corollary to that. Because we know that our consciousness and our intentions actually play into that, right? Mm-hmm. So, and we want to have the option of changing energy. So here's something, like I've been on the occasion to have to be out, and there just literally wasn't anything. There was no place I could stop to get something to eat. I needed to get something. And so I would find a place where they just had fast food or whatever. And I try to get the healthiest thing I could find. Mm-hmm. But instead of telling myself, oh, this is going to be terrible and all that, instead I began to think about all the people that were being employed. And I began to also be grateful to the animal that gave its life for the meat, and the farmers that were able to work and get the food to that. As even though it's not as rich and as good for me as other things could, what I was going to do is I was going to extract the best from it I could. Because, let's face it, you got to eat.
Yeah.
And
And yes,
and
truth be
sometimes you
told,
don't have
sometimes
options.
that's
And
the best
way to-
option. Yeah,
It's like
sometimes it's the best option.
it's like when when I'm out looking for if I have to eat out like that, it's much like
Yep.
being out and having to go to the bathroom and you don't want to because you don't want to use a strange bathroom. Like, man, I don't want to do this. This all sucks, and you have to find one that that's kind of healthy looking, and
Right, yeah. I
But
got you. That's exactly what it feels like.
yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not even trying to poke fun at that or anything, I mean,
No.
and I think that's
No, I get it.
I think that's for me. It feels like that's a healthy attitude, because it really puts in perspective in the way it really probably should be more like the way it is.
I think what Jeff's getting at here is that when he does have to make that choice, though, he tries to make it with the most positive mental intention that he can, or whatever.
If you have to eat out,
because he is, like he told you, be conscious of what you're eating. But if you do look at it in like a negative way, it's more likely that it's gonna, if you're like, oh man, this is gonna make me feel like shit, then it's very likely to make you feel like shit.
Have you guys heard of Jainism?
Okay. Yeah, Jainism.
It reminds me of
that's
Jainism.
freaky, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I was going to say about the whole food thing, too, is another element that I pay very, very close attention to is the energy of the people preparing the food. Like, if they're in a really, really bad space, they're angry, they're stressed out, whatever, I don't want any part of that food. I will walk away. I'll not eat because it inevitably doesn't sit well. And if you pay attention, you'll discover that that's true, too. Did you ever see the movie Like Water for Chocolate?
I have not.
No.
You should absolutely watch that movie. There's a woman
Oh wait, maybe I
who
have.
makes
It's Selma
chocolate.
Hayek.
And she's, she'd be classically called, a urban or a village witch or whatever, in a certain sort of sense. And what she does is she puts intention into her chocolates and influences people's thoughts and feelings. And at first she doesn't, I don't know that she does it completely consciously at the beginning, but she discovers along the way that she has this ability. And my observation has been, and the Taoists certainly teach this, that is absolutely true. There was a particular time where I was married before, and there was a lot of conflict. And during that time, every time I would eat the food my wife made at that time, I would get very unwell. It wouldn't sit. It would feel like it never digest. Yeah, it wasn't my wife now. It was a previous wife. And I'm not going to mention any names. I've had a couple of them, so
Right.
we won't go into that.
Hey, I have four ex-wives that live
in case they listen or anything.
Oh, yeah.
But I noticed that every time, if they were upset or angry, and they were a lot with me at that time, and, probably rightly in some ways, in other ways unfairly, just like all things, it was a mixed bag. A mixed bag of nuts, which we both were, a mixed bag of nuts. But whenever she did, and she was in a bad space, man, it made me feel really unwell. And even if it was really healthy food, I mean, even if we stir fry vegetables and some brown rice and stuff, I would still feel like it didn't digest. And I've experimented with it before. They talk about like, oh, you can taste the love in that food. Well, there is something to that. When people cook with love, they literally empower the energy. We discovered as we studied water that our thoughts and feelings around the water and about the water and to the water influences the structure, the crystalline structures that form. If you're like cussing at it and hating it and telling it bad, I hate you and all that other stuff, they discovered the forms that it creates are really ugly and they look like cancer.
Yeah, there's a name for that. I can't remember what that's called. I've seen
Secret of
that.
Water.
What the what was it?
The Secret of Water, I think, is the book.
Okay.
I don't know if it was there was a video made about it a while back.
Didn't they do this with plants too, where they would?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's
Yogurt.
why you talk to plants and play music for them and stuff like that.
Bacteria,
We have
then.
conversations with our plants all the time, and in fact, sometimes we experience them calling back to us. My mentor that I've talked about before, Raven, he was in his garden one time, and he very much has a deep, powerful relationship with plants. And in fact, he is reviving an old tradition called pharmakute, which are people who are deeply connected to the plant world, the spirit of plants. And he definitely has that. So he was working in his garden one day, and he kind of heard this, like, help. And he kind of like, it was kind of in his consciousness. And he was like, what? And he turned around and looked, and he kind of felt like it was coming from the rowan tree. And he went over there, and there was this fungus that was growing on it. and it was like killing it, and he absolutely heard it. And what's interesting is, as he's done some research into this phenomena of how communicate, Rupert Sheldrake work and all that, he discovered that, they release electromagnetic fields and everything to communicate to each other. And this, to Raven, this said to him, and I agree with him, that it recognized him as a being who could help it. Much like they will, like if there is a parasite that's eating it, they will actually put out a pheromone that attracts something that kills that parasite. And they actually communicate to that
Right.
other species. And that's part of the whole intelligence of the forest and the synergy of the web and all that. And so, this is very real stuff.
Yeah,
there's
it
a
should
lot
be
of
beared in mind when people watch that movie, The Happening, because I've heard a lot of
Yeah.
people talk about that movie being hokey, and it's not, man. Like, it was actually a really interesting concept that I'd never seen on film before,
Wow.
Have you ever seen?
Yeah. I think I might have seen it. I've seen so many movies.
That's the one where
maybe
everybody
I
was like
remember
jumping
it,
off of buildings,
but I don't
and
remember it
weird
well.
stuff like
Huh?
that. I think it's one where
Yeah.
there's like this weird group psychosis thing happened.
Yeah, people
and-
were jumping off
Yeah.
buildings and stuff, but it was because the plants
Oh, right.
around them was releasing
Right.
chemicals in defense of urbanization, I believe, and causing
right,
people
right.
just
Yeah,
to kill
trying to kill
themselves.
people.
Yeah.
I remember that now.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, trying to create mass extinctions because we were a plague
Yeah.
to the forest and the plants.
The AIs will have
yeah.
the same idea.
Yeah, we had a big
Yeah,
discussion
yeah,
on
that's
that.
idea. So anyway, I've got to wrap up here. It's getting
Yeah, I was going to
too
say,
late.
buddy, we've been at this for a while here.
For 2.5 hours or so.
Well, I really appreciate it, man. I really appreciate you making time in the schedule, bud. I can't wait to do this again. These conversations are always informative and a lot of fun. So I appreciate you being here, man.
It was nice talking to you again, Jeff.
Thank you. Nice talking to you. Can I make a shameless plug here?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Yeah. All right. So as I said, I'm really trying to impact the world in a positive way and create attitudes of peace and harmony where people really begin to get it on a fundamental, intuitive level internally, and they realize that it's a better way of life. And if you're interested in anything like that, and the Qigong or the longevity practices and the health, I teach Tai Chi there, all sorts of stuff, and all of it based in Taoist philosophy, which is a lot of what I've been talking about, and the metaphysics behind it. And I do get into that as well. Just come find me on Patreon.com. That's Patreon.com, Patreon.com/Occidental Taoist. And I post on there daily. I've got a daily Tao that I post up. I talk about classical Taoist texts, and I kind of try to reinterpret them or give people insight into what I think they might mean. For whatever that's worth. But I share a lot of knowledge about the things I've been talking about, and how to. I'm a very practical, pragmatic guy. Matt knows I was an engineer first. And that was my approach to all of this. It had to work. And so I took everything apart that I ever learned. I took it apart piece by piece and understood every piece. And I'm trying to share it with folks. And I'm trying to share it with folks genuinely to make an impact in the world. That's why I gave up the idea of leave no footprints, because I figured the only people leaving footprints are people that I really don't want leaving footprints. And that somebody has to stand up and leave a different kind of footprint. And there are other people doing it. I don't want to say that I'm the only one. Obviously, I'm a small fish right now. But I've decided to kind of come out of the hermitage and share my work. And
That's
I
cool.
put a lot of free content for that.
That's
just
really cool.
because I want people to know what's out there. And yeah, I've got the Patreon. People can become a patron and kind of support my work through monetary remuneration. At the same time, they get rewards for that, and including longer instruction, more detailed stuff, and like the first Qigong video I released was an hour and 20 minutes of instruction with another 20-minute practice session that you could do after you kind of assimilated all the information. And I release one every week, a new one, either Qigong or Tai Chi or some element of all of this stuff. And at some point, once I've gotten kind of through all of the basic material of Qigong and Tai Chi and Baguozhang, which is another Chinese martial art that is also internal, I'll do internal alchemy and the metaphysics and, go into a lot more of that. So I've got years and years of material.
Such a wealth of information, and definitely from somebody who clearly has a deep understanding and a passion for it. It sounds very interesting.
Thank you, Eric. You should come check it out. And I'm going to go check out
I will.
the X Factory Tangent's work, because it sounds like his is really fantastic, and I'd really like to just.
Yeah, he's a really cool dude, man. He really is. Super nice guy. That's
great.
So
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'll have to send him a note and just say hi.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, he's
Brendan.
very responsive. He's like I said, the guy. I don't know when he sleeps. Let's just put it that way. And it just seems like he's always working for his artists or for the artists. I can't even really, because like you said, it's the way he structures everything. It's kind of a collaborative type thing. So, and I think he really just views himself as just a piece in that machine that he's built. You know.
Wow.
Well, very cool, man.
What a great place.
I appreciate you being on the show. Again, that's Jeff Cody, the Occidental Taoist. I'm looking forward to having you on the show again here soon, bud. My co-host, Mr. Eric Smith. Again, thank you for participating tonight, bud, even though you're dragging-ass tired.
My pleasure, always.
And we'll wrap up there, and thanks for listening, everybody.